Good evening, friends. A warm welcome to all. Today, the webinar is on the wonders of the provisions of Section 251(1)(c) of Income Tax Act. CIT appeals is the first appellate authority under the Income Tax Act 1961 to whom the CC can approach if he is aggrieved by the order of the assessing officer. The CIT appeal shall dispose the appeal so filed by exercising his powers under Section 251 of the Act, which reads as under. In disposing of an appeal, the Commissioner of Appeals shall have the following powers. In an appeal against an order of assessment, he may confirm, reduce, enhance, or annul the assessment. In an appeal against an order imposing a penalty, he may confirm or cancel such order or vary it so as either to enhance or to reduce the penalty. In any other case, he may pass such orders in the appeal as he thinks fit. And for this, we have a guest speaker, Shri Sanjay Srivastava, IRS retired. Born in July 1964 at Sitamarhi, Bihar, and graduated in history with honors from Patna University and qualified the Civil Services Examination 1986 at the age of 23 years and was allocated IRS in 1987 batch. Has been posted to Nagpur, Madras, Calcutta, Siliguri, Jalpaiguri, Gangtok, Amritsar, Rohtak, Faridabad, Delhi, Mangalore, Ranchi, Patna, and Noida in various wings of Income Tax Department. Besides being the guest faculty with in-house training courses and outside with CBI, CNDG, IGNOU, various public sector and state government undertakings, Indian Army, etc., and has studied various branches of law in addition to the direct tax law. Presently working on his book on Holy Quran. And we have with us none other than CA Vivek Khuranaji, founder of CA Sansaar, and his name is just enough for the CAs. Now, I would request CA Vivek Khuranaji to welcome him and give him a welcome address. So, please.
Thank you very much, Stuti ji. Respected Sanjay Srivastava ji, CA Stuti Mahajan ji, all respected member of the profession, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my sincere thanks to Sanjay ji for accepting our invitation and giving us his valuable time. Sir, thank you very much. And my sincere thanks to our director, we can say that, CA Ashwini ji, for organizing this webinar for such a wonderful way. I can give this credit to CA Ashwini ji because he did everything. And when I called Sanjay ji, then he said we can do a webinar on section 251(1)(c) because very less awareness about this section. What's the power of CIT? What he can do in his own best judgment through the best order he can pass in the appeal. Very few members know. So this is the wonder of this provision of section 251(1)(c) of the Income Tax Act, both for the assessee and for the revenue as well. So my request to Sanjay ji, we're not taking so much time. So please, over to you. So please guide our member and us regarding this wonderful section 251(1)(c). Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ashwini ji. Thank you, Stuti ji. और सीए अश्विनी जी को भी जिन्होंने मुझसे पहली बार इसका चर्चा किया. Now, before we start with the exact provision of section 251(1)(c), what we need to consider, especially with the professionals, the chartered accountants who are recognized in the Income Tax Act as a competent professional to represent the cases, almost at par with advocates. So there is no difference between an advocate and a chartered accountant under the income tax law. Both are at similar footing and both can appear and represent the taxpayer, the clients. Now, what is the taxation scheme of taxation? That is very important, and very few persons pay attention to that, including professionals, and which in turn creates a lot of prejudice to both sides, that is the taxpayer as well as the tax collector. The taxation is a different issue altogether from general administration of the government. The taxation is one topic which is specifically dealt with in the Constitution of India. Article 265 is a specific article on Constitution of India, in Constitution of India, that deals with the taxation, and it is in fact a bar. It prevents collection of any tax which is not sanctioned by the law. So the article reads that no tax shall be levied or collected except with the authority of law. That's a very small article, one of the smallest article, but it is a very potent article. If any one of you think why government has to present budget every year, I mean, government is spending government's money, why to go to parliament to take the authority for collection of taxes? Every government does, the central government does, state government does, and local self-government like municipality, etc. They also present their budget to their respective assembly or council and then take the authority. It is because of this, to lift the prohibition or the bar of Article 265, that the government has to go to the legislature and take the legal sanction to levy a tax and collect it. Now, levy is the act of the parliament or the assembly or the council, and collection, of course, is the collection mechanism, which is the taxation department. Now, Article 265 makes it very clear that nobody can collect a single paisa from the citizen or a tax resident unless there is authority in law. So, as a taxpayer, it becomes your inherent right to check and question whether there is an authority in law to demand a tax from you or to collect the tax from you, and conversely for the revenue. If there is an authority in law in terms of the provision of Article 265, then the person who is representing the revenue gets an inherent right to collect that much of tax from the taxpayer if it is payable by him or her under the. So this Article 265 is the very important. It is the scheme of the taxation in our country under our law, under the constitution of our country. And that has to be always kept in mind, because that reduces or renders the taxation matter as a purely legal issue. Of course, accounting is important because the legal issue is totally based on the accounting situation. Unless the accounting is there, law cannot operate. But the right to take money from a citizen or take money from a tax resident comes to the government, that is the authority, only because of the law. So whenever you are facing any taxation matter, whether in your personal case or on behalf of your client, and as chartered accountants are professionally recognized under Section 288 of the Income Tax Act, and you are representing your clients, your responsibility becomes double, because you have a moral obligation to your client to see to it that he is not prejudiced, nothing is taken away from him which is not to be taken away from him under the law. So income tax proceedings becomes a legal proceedings. Now, if you go to the general law, only one appeal is permitted under the CPC, that is Civil Procedure Code. In any dispute, only one appeal is permitted to the person who is aggrieved or who contests the order of the authority. And thereafter, only a second appeal will lie to the High Court only on a substantive question of law and not on the question of fact. But under the taxation law, and especially income tax law, two appeals are permitted on the question of fact. You all know, you have been filing appeals and dealing with that. The first appeal is to Commissioner Appeal, and thereafter the second appeal has been permitted to the ITAT, and thereafter the appeal on the questions of law to the High Court and the Supreme Court. Now, why the legislature in its wisdom made an exception of the CPC scheme and permitted one more appeal also speaks the larger constitutional scheme of things under Article 265, that since a state, that is the government or a state or the authority or the taxation department, is taking away a major portion, almost more than 1/4 or more, even 30%, and there was a time when it was almost 80% of the income. Since the state is taking a major portion of the income of the person who has earned the income, who could be either a physical person or an artificial juridical person, the state has to be extra transparent and extra cautious, permitting additional opportunity to the taxpayer to demonstrate that he is not liable to pay what is being demanded from him under the law. And that's why making an exception from the normal scheme of appeals the income tax law and generally other taxation law has provided a second appeal on the question of fact itself. In fact, it becomes three-tier adjudication. That first adjudication takes place before the assessing officer, where a taxpayer has every right to contest any demand or any issue that he is not liable under the law to pay the tax. If he does not succeed, if the authority assessing officer does not accept his version, which invariably happens, generally speaking, in most of the cases, assessing officers tends to be conservative or little inclined towards revenue because he remains a revenue officer. Then he has a right to prefer an appeal as a matter of right. It is a statutory appeal. So appeal as a matter of right means appeal cannot be dismissed in limine on technical issues. Of course, it can be dismissed on technical issues of non-payment of fee, etc. But subject to that, if the appeal is in prescribed format, the requisite fee has been deposited and the verification is properly done, the enclosures are proper, etc., then appeal cannot be dismissed in limine. It has to be decided on merits. That is the substance of the dispute raised. And after commissioner appeal, it goes to. So today, we are concerned with what commissioner appeals can do. All of you, most of you know that the powers of the commissioner appeal, what can be done in an appeal, are there in section 251 and then 251(1) and A, B, C, and thereafter 251(2), which is a procedural requirement that if an enhancement is intended, a procedure has to be followed. Commissioner appeal has also some power given under section 250 under subsection 4. He is permitted to make an inquiry either by himself or cause an inquiry by the assessing officer or any other authority whom he can direct for law. So here we are concerned today, we are concerned with the powers of commissioner appeal under section 251 and subsection 1, clause C, small c. Now it's again a very one-line section. It says in any other case, whatever commissioner appeals thinks fit and proper. So in any other case is the catchphrase. And thereafter, of course, whatever a commissioner appeal will think fit and proper. But fit and proper is again governed by the general law that any authority cannot act arbitrarily. So that fit and proper has to fit in that requirement of judicial test, that it has to be just and fair and equitable. So if we read the provision of clause A deals with the appeal against the assessment, in which commissioner appeal has given those 4 words, magic words. Then in clause B, the appeals regard against penalty has been dealt with. And thereafter in C, it simply says in any other case, whatever commissioner appeals fits, things to be fit and proper. Now, this provision is badly underutilized from both sides, neither by the revenue nor by the taxpayer and the professionals who are representing. That will include chartered accountants, that will include lawyers who are practicing on the taxation side, and other permitted categories, but primarily lawyers, chartered accountants and lawyers, because they are specialized, they are specialists of their area. Rarely, assessing officer moves an application under section 251(1)(c), and more rarely, the appellant, who has much more at stake because he will be the loser, he will have to part with the money which he has earned with all his hard work and sincerity and efforts and resources at his disposal. Rarely I have found a taxpayer, or on behalf of a taxpayer or an appellant, the professional who is appearing for him, who is representing him, that is the chartered accountant or the tax advocate, invoking the jurisdiction under section 251(1)(c) of the commissioner appeal for any requisite benefits. Now, what can be done under section 251(1)(c) and why this provision was brought on the statute? Let us first understand this. The legal arrangement is such that there are 2 types of law. One is called general law. General law is which applies to general situations. And there is a second category of law which is called special law. Special law is something which deals with only a special circumstances. That means that will not be applicable to non-special category of situations or non-covered category of situations. That will be applicable only to those situations which are specifically mentioned in that law. Example is like IPC. IPC is a general law because it deals with crime as such. It doesn't deal with any particular type of crime. Almost every crime is covered. But under the Income Tax Act or any other taxation law, you are dealing with taxation that itself becomes a small segment of the general area covered by the law. And thereafter, within taxation, a particular type of taxation, that is the direct tax laws. And there are other indirect tax laws covered by their respective acts like Custom Act and Excise Act or GST Act, etc. So the rule is that if there is a conflict between the general law and the special law prevails. General law gets superseded. And wherever a special law does not have a provision to deal with any particular situation or contingency, the general law will apply. But if a special law has created a provision by itself, then a special law will not apply. Example is that income tax law has its own rules. Rules have been framed because the parliament has delegated the rule-making power on the authority implementing. That is subject to, of course, approval of the parliament. But the rule-making powers are there under which rules are framed. So wherever an particular issue arising out of the rule-making power under the income tax law is covered by the rules framed thereunder, the general law, even if there is a provision, will not apply. That special rules which have been framed will apply. But where there is no provision, if a situation arises which is not covered by the special law or rules framed thereunder, then the general law will apply, and any party or any litigant to a dispute under the income tax law can invoke the authority of the adjudicating authority, the jurisdiction of the adjudicating authority under that general law. Here in this case, before understanding the true import of section 251(1)(c), it is important to go to general law for the time being and see what is the provision. Under the CPC, under section 151, there is certain provision. The heading itself is very clear. It says saving of the inherent power of the court, meaning thereby court will have some inherent powers. Inherent means those are part of the court itself and for which no special provision is required. I mean, even if there is no specific provision under some law, the court will still have some powers as inherent powers, as inbuilt powers of the court, without there being any provision in the particular law. And those powers will be exercised by the court or any party to the dispute before the court. The litigant can invoke the jurisdiction under those inherent powers for any particular relief, which will of course be both sides to the dispute, because we follow adversarial system of litigation in our country. And there are two words which are very important. If you read the section further, it says ends of justice and to abuse of process of law. Meaning thereby, the inherent powers will include all the powers to ensure the end of justice. Now, what will be the end of justice in the taxation law will be that a taxpayer should not be forced to part with his money, part with his hard-earned money, otherwise than the due process of law, because that is the protection given under Article 265 of the Constitution. So if any case is made out that a taxpayer is being made to part with his money or something is being demanded or collected from a taxpayer otherwise than the due process of law, the ends of justice will become that the concerned appellate authority or higher authority, if he is competent, has to ensure that that unlawful, irregular, or illegal action is not taken, and the appellate authority or the court must intervene to prevent that. That becomes the ends of justice. and the misuse of the process of law, meaning thereby taking advantage of the process or procedure of the law, the provision of the law. No party to any issue, whether it is revenue or the taxpayer, should be taking undue advantage to gain something at the cost of the other. So that will be called abuse of the process of law. Example is very simple, that an appeal has been filed and taxpayer writes to assessing officer that, look sir, I have filed an appeal, my appeal is pending, and therefore please don't recover the tax from me. Or he will say that CIT appeal has made some order or some observation, the effect of which is that the tax disputed tax should not be recovered from me. That becomes abuse of the process, because mere filing will not create any right. No right will accrue to the person who has filed the appeal against the person against whom the appeal has been filed. In this case, revenue. So in that case, revenue will have a right to approach the commissioner appeal to either clarify or to pass an order, to make an observation that the revenue is not obstructed or not prevented from enforcing the recovery of the disputed demand. Same right will be available to the taxpayer also if he or she feels that the other side is abusing the process of law, that the revenue in this case. And then he has a right to approach the authority, adjudicating authority, the appellate authority, the court, invoking the inherent jurisdiction to intervene. And the court or the authority or the commissioner appeal will have to intervene. If he refuses, there will lie an appeal if he passes an order, or if he doesn't attend to it, certainly a writ will lie to the High Court seeking a direction of either mandamus or certiorari, depending on the facts, that commissioner appeal should decide this issue. And invariably, whenever some taxpayer goes to the High Court approaches, like once the Allahabad High Court directed me that I should decide the stay application of the taxpayer within 2 weeks, because at that time the scheme was that current appeals will not be taken up in the current year itself. The brought forward appeals will be taken first. And since I had large number of brought forward pendencies before me, I could not have taken up the current appeal. So I refused that I can't take your current appeal. So immediately he went to the Allahabad High Court, got a writ issued in against me that I should decide, all right, I will not attend to the current appeal, but I must decide the stay application. Why I am mentioning is that then Chief Commissioner of mine, she asked me that how can CIT appeal dispose a stay application? Because in Income Tax Act, only assessing officer has been given power to keep the demand in abeyance. And of course, she agreed when I explained to her that, first of all, there are two issues to it. First of all, this commissioner appeal will always have an inherent power to attend to a petition for a stay of demand, or grant a stay, or even suspend the operation of the assessment order, which rarely I have seen any appellant, any professional seeking that the operation of the assessment order should be suspended by the commissioner appeal, which is permissible, how I will explain. So initially she was a little reluctant, but then I explained to her that there's no point going to Supreme Court and making fool of us. High Court has directed me. In any case, it is a direction by the High Court under writ jurisdiction, under which High Court can issue any direction, whether there is a provision under law or not. So this becomes binding, and it was at that time that I explained to her, and to her credit, she read it. And after 2 days, she again called me and he said, yes, you are right. Even without writ petition, the appellant could have straight away moved to you an application under section 251(1)(c), saying that since his case under 251(1)(a), that is the appeal against the assessment order, was not being taken up because of certain directions issued by the CBDT, and which were general directions. There was no, discrimination against anyone. All current appeals were not to be attended. It was not against that anybody's appeal was picked up. So that was perfectly all right. So under 251(1)(c), instead of going to the writ, that person could have straight away come to the commissioner appeal and said that 251(1)(c), please decide my stay application. pass an order, direct the assessing officer not to enforce the demand because of the such and such reason, which of course will be subject to merits of the case, substantively will be considered. So then we started reading, and I was shocked to find that in as elaborate commentary like Chaturvedi and Pithisaria, there is absolutely not a single judgment on the provisions of section 251(1)(c). I was just before this discussion telling to your host of the day, Mr. Vivek, that there is not a single judgment because perhaps no dispute has been taken to the constitutional courts for settling the provision of law. And in about 50 pages on section 251(1), the Chaturvedi and Pithisaria has just one small para of 4 lines, merely saying that any other order which is not the subject matter of 251(1)(a) and 251(1)(b) can be appealed against under section 251(1)(c). But very little on the scope, very little on the procedure, very little on the inherent jurisdiction, etc., etc. And that probably has not been done by the authors, because there has been never any dispute, there has been never any occasion where somebody should apply mind. So, coming to the provisions of 251(1)(c), having explained what is the constitutional arrangement of taxation, where a taxpayer is prevented from paying anything which is not sanctioned by the law, where a state is expressly prohibited from collecting a single paisa of tax from any taxpayer except with the authority of law. And it is this reason that every year government goes to the parliament or the legislative assemblies of the state or the councils of the municipalities all over the country to get the authority to levy the tax and thereafter collect the same, that too in accordance with the procedure prescribed how that it will be collected. So these provide, Article 265 provide a very important inherent right to the taxpayer to demand, insist, and enforce that nothing is to be payable by him, is to be paid by him, unless the authority is there in law. And law is very clear that he who proposes something has to corroborate it. So in the first instance, it is the assessing officer who has to corroborate if he says something, that something is payable by the taxpayer over and above the return of income. In that case, the taxpayer, the assessing officer will have to corroborate that how that is payable. That's why assessing officer passes a speaking order explaining that why something has been found to be payable and something is to be paid or is payable by the taxpayer. Thereafter, the taxpayer will come to the appeal and there things reverse. Now it is the taxpayer who is the appellant before the appellate authority, whether it is the first appellate authority or further higher on. It is he who is proposing or suggesting that the order of the assessing officer is incorrect for some reason, of course. So in that case, the primary onus comes on the taxpayer, the appellant, or the professional representing the appellant, that is the chartered accountant or the tax advocate, to demonstrate how the order is wrong. Meaning thereby, he has to demonstrate that how there is no authority in law to sustain or support what assessing officer has proposed in his assessment order. Now it will take time because both sides have inherent right to rebut each other. So once an appeal is filed, raising the grounds of law, raising the issues of fact, the other side, that is the assessing officer against whose order the appeal has been filed, has all the rights to rebut and counter. So assessing officer will have to be allowed reasonable opportunity. Thereafter, there may be a case of rejoinder. The appellant will have an inherent right of filing rejoinder after the reply of the assessing officer, again explaining that how the reply is not correct or not maintainable or not sustainable, and why the version of the appellant should be accepted by the authority. So this will take time. And then that is not the only case before the appellate authority. Appellate authority will have n number of cases, large number of cases. There may be other situations And since the type of calendar we follow, work calendar we follow, effectively in any year, any authority has something around 200 or 225 working days, because 100 plus days are Saturday and Sunday. Then there are closed holidays. Then there are some personal contingencies. There may be some situations with the professional, and then he may not be able to attend because of professional commitments as well as some personal emergencies. There may be some difficulties with the authority itself, maybe some other engagements, maybe some personal situations. So all those things taken together in 1 year of 365 days, any court or any appellate authority generally does not get more than 200 working days, and in which large number of cases are to be dealt with. So chances are, all things remaining same, all things remaining fair and equal, an appeal will not be decided before 6 months, before the first appellate authority, which may go up to a year. And if you go further higher, it will be about a year, which may go up to 2 years, sometimes 3 years, maybe longer in some peculiar cases. So what happens for that intervening period for which your appeal is pending? Both sides will have a clear case. The taxpayer will have a heartburning that why should I pay something which is not payable by me, and when I have made out a clear case before in my appeal, before commissioner appeal, that it is not payable by me, meaning thereby, in terms of Article 265, there is no authority of law vested in the revenue or vested in the income tax department or the taxation authority to collect this tax. And why should I part with my money? Ultimately, money is what? Money is an opportunity. That's all. So opportunity is to be availed when it comes to you. If you do not avail the opportunity when opportunity comes to you, it's no opportunity. You lose. So likewise, money is basically an opportunity. So why should you lose the opportunity of money, of whatever you want? You want to enjoy it, you want to invest it, you want to further earn money out of that money. So all that will depend on a real-time availability of money with you. And if you pay the tax, that means the real-time availability or availability of money is not with you. And after some time, maybe after a year or 2 years, the things are decided in favor, whereafter department returns your money, maybe with some interest also. But by that time, you would have lost on the opportunity which the money would have provided to you had the money been available with you. So assessing office, the assessee or the appellant or the taxpayer or the professional on his behalf has an permissible, lawful situation of not paying the tax if his case is strong. Whether it is strong or not, of course, is an issue of debate and will have to be seen. But if he has a confidence, if he has a conviction, and he's confident, sure, that there is no authority in terms of Article 265 to demand what is being demanded, then why should he pay? And why should he lose the opportunity which money will provide to him during this intervening period? And it's a very fair, maintainable, logical, lawful, decent, morally sustainable thinking of the taxpayer or the appellant, which cannot be faulted. On the other side, the revenue or the state or the tax collecting authority, the income tax department, has also the same feeling. They will feel that no, our order is perfectly all right. The appellant is raising an issue because doesn't want to part with his money, doesn't want to pay the money. There is authority in law. It has been very elaborately discussed in the appellate order, and all reasoning has been given. There is no dispute remaining except raising the dispute for the sake of dispute. And therefore, we should be allowed to collect, or the taxpayer should be asked to pay, made to pay whatever is being demanded, because that is lawfully demanded and is lawfully payable. So there should be no hindrance. So these two conflicting, both of which are perfectly possible and perfectly permissible, creates a situation where some intervening intervention by the appellate authority or commissioner appeal or the ITAT is required. Because both the competing and conflicting arguments are to be balanced against each other. And of course, in law, for the interim relief, there are set criteria, three major criteria: the balance of convenience, the irreparable or irreversible damage to the sufferer, and general provision of law, etc., etc. So, in that situation, if you one party makes out a case that all the ingredients of the interlocutory orders are satisfied, that person will be perfectly within his rights to ask the court, ask the adjudicating authority, ask the commissioner appeal, the appellate authority, to pass an intervening interlocutory order, grant an interim relief, which will be operating till the appeal is finally decided, and whereafter it will merge with the final order. And it will be an obligation of the authority, the commissioner appeal, to pass that order. Now, invariably, in practical, what happens is, after filing of appeal, the parties, of course, the appellants as well as the defendant revenue, they keep pressing for early disposal of the appeal, but they rarely take recourse to that provision of law which is meant for such situations. It is not always possible to dispose the appeal as per demand or requirement. Invariably, the taxpayer says that assessing officer is pressing hard for the payment of the disputed tax, so please decide my appeal. But all right, this could be a demand, but it is not always possible, and invariably it is not possible to entertain. Because every taxpayer will have the same feeling, every appellant has the same feeling that he is getting inconvenience and he is the most prejudiced person under the sun, and his appeal should be given all the priority. So what the authority will do, what the poor commissioner appeal will do, he can't go hear all the appeals in one day. He can't. So some system has to be followed, and some system is followed. So despite the prayer for early hearing, rarely, invariably, the early hearing prayers are accepted by the commissioner appeal or tribunal or higher courts. Invariably, of course, in some cases it is done, but generally it is not entertained. So what is the remedy? Now, those who study the law, those who know the law, the provision of a statute are to be read harmoniously. That is called doctrine of harmonious construction, meaning thereby the entire statute has to be read, entire law has to be read as a whole, where each provision of law has to complement the other provisions of law unless expressly superseded. That is called non-obstante, or starting with notwithstanding, something like that, or at least the larger objective. So in the case of Income Tax Act, the substantive provision is the charging section, section 4. Now, all other provisions have to complement the provision of section 4. The section 4 is the right of the state to collect the tax as per the rates prescribed by the parliament for the particular assessment year from the particular category of persons subject to residential status. While at the same time it confers an obligation on the taxpayer to pay those. And attached to that, it confers a right on the taxpayer not to pay anything which is not in accordance with the provisions of section 4. So if a taxpayer is able to show that the tax which is demanded by him does not fall under the purview of section 4, that is the charging section, he is perfectly well within his right not to pay the tax, and the assessing officer revenue cannot demand the tax. So the provisions of law are to be harmoniously constructed or harmoniously read, that each provision complements the substantive provision, that is in the case of income tax, the charging section. It can't be that something will go against that. It is not. The court has to reconcile. Even if it outwardly appears, the appellate authority, the adjudicating authority, the court has to reconcile each provision, and that is called harmonious construction. That is always to be kept in mind, that if there are two provisions, one helping the taxpayer, another helping the revenue, then they can't be read in conflict with each other. They have to be reconciled with each other, and a harmonious situation is to be evolved, that is by the appellate authority, where the larger purpose of the statute or the law is to be kept in mind, that is the chargeability or the collectability of the tax or liability to pay tax as in terms of Article 265. And second issue is that purposive legislation, no court or judicial authority will ever say or will allow to be said that a particular provision has been randomly put there without any purpose. No. The legislature is wise, legislature has wisdom. So any provision of law in any act, any law, if it is there on the statute, then it is to be presumed, accepted, admitted that that provision has some purpose. So having explained this, I am coming to the situation that going by the situation where 251(1)(c) is not used by any of the party, neither by the revenue nor by the appellant, why 251(1)(c) has been brought on the statute in the first place? This will not be admitted, this will not be accepted or allowed to be stated that it is some redundant provision. No, it has to have a purpose, and it is there since the enactment of the Act, right from 1961. It has to have a purpose. Now, what is that purpose? So the purpose of today's discussion is to bring to your notice that what could be the purpose of 251(1)(c), how it can be used by both sides for a proper, fair adjudication so that the prejudice to any side to the dispute is minimized. I'm not saying it can be totally eliminated, that will always be there, because certainly element of subjectivity will always be there, because ultimately human mind is subjective. But subject to that, it should be minimized and the content of objectivity should be maximized. So the first purpose is, I'm borrowing the catchphrases from 151 CPC. 151 CPC, the general law, CPC general law, it applies, that prescribes the procedure by which any court, civil court, that will include a taxation court or a taxation authority or a taxation tribunal, including the assessing officer, is to be governed and to follow. So unless it is specifically overruled by the particular act under which that authority is operating. So to the extent income tax law provides its own procedure, the CPC will be overruled or superseded. And where there is no provision, you can bring in CPC, that is the general law. Here in this case, the counter 251(1)(c) becomes the counterpart of 151. Exactly. So whatever can be done under section 151 CPC before a civil court can be done under section 251(1)(c) before a commissioner appeal. If you think of it, the scope of 251(1)(c) will become very large, very clear, very specific, very transparent. If you remember the legal proceedings before the courts, as a chartered accountant also, though you are not permitted to appear in a court as a chartered accountant, but you must have been, taking the help of your lawyer colleagues in various disputes. All stay applications before a civil court are moved under section 151 CPC. The counterpart is there in CRPC also, but we are not concerned with that at this stage. Whenever you move any application before a civil court for a stay against the impugned order, for staying of the operation of the impugned order, you invoke the jurisdiction of the court under section 151 CPC. Since I am saying that 151 CPC is the replica, 251(1) CPC of the Income Tax Act is the exact replica of 151 CPC, whatever can be asked under 151 CPC by invoking the jurisdiction of the civil court can be asked by invoking the jurisdiction of Commissioner Appeal under section 251(1)(c) before Commissioner Appeal, and Commissioner Appeal will have to pass a speaking order on the application moved, petition moved, and which being an order of the Commissioner Appeal will be subject to the jurisdiction of the ITAT, because any order passed by Commissioner Appeal will be appealable to the ITAT. And on further issues of law as well as writ, etc., those orders will be amenable to the jurisdiction of the High Court and the Supreme Court. So rarely, while suffering hardships, both sides, it is not that in every appeal the revenue is right or in every appeal the appellant is right. In some cases, revenue suffers, in some cases, appellant suffers, because assessing officer has his own priorities. He will keep pressing, he will keep invoking coercive measures, he will keep attaching the bank accounts, he will keep attaching the daters, he will keep pestering the taxpayer to pay the demand, saying pendency of appeal confers no right on you not to, and legally he is right. So suffers. Sometimes taxpayer does not pay, though there is a strong case of revenue taking advantage of the pendency of appeal. He says that no, my appeal is pending. Please don't pester me to pay. Let my appeal be decided. I will abide by that. If I am found wrong, I will pay all the demands. So then revenue suffers. So both sides get prejudiced because of this. So solution is, when you are filing an appeal, along with your appeal, just like application in the civil code, if you feel that you have a strong case, if you feel that the requirements of the interim orders are fulfilled in your case, the appellant can move along with the appeal itself as stay application. In fact, in one case, a retired senior officer came to me along with one of my retired chief commissioners, and case was very clear. While he was in service in IAS, he had built a house in his Cadre estate, from where he retired and came to Delhi, was living in Noida. He sold that house in that estate. His return was still there, so he paid taxes, whatever was payable, filed return also. But since he was living in Noida, the CIB information came to assessing officer in Noida, who sent a notice, which was not received by him because house was locked. And of course, not getting response, he passed an ex parte assessment, completed an ex parte assessment, raised the demand, adding the entire sale concession of several crores and creating another huge demand of several crores with tax and interest, etc., etc. And the poor person was in complete this thing. A very senior professional came with him and he said, sir, isko please immediately decide kar dijiye, urgency but decide. I said that what is the need? Why to make an exception? You move an application under section 251(1)(c) for a stay of demand, explain all your facts. Even if you are not able to make out a legal case that how you are entitled, if you state all the facts, at least I will understand whether those facts fulfill the criteria for passing an interim order or not. So initially he was not convinced. He probably felt that I am taking him for a ride. But anyway, the senior IAS officer who must have acted as district magistrate and divisional commissioner and implemented some revenue laws, he could get the idea behind me. He said, all right, sir, we will move an application. Give us 2 days time. They moved an application. I stayed the demand and directed the assessing officer not to enforce the demand till the appeal was decided. And appeal, of course, got decided in under 6 months' time, because since it was an ex parte assessment, so whatever issues were raised has to go to assessing officer for reply, etc. So the first benefit of section 251(1)(c) to the appellant or the taxpayer is that immediately on filing of appeal, he can move an application then and there, asking for a stay on the demand. It is also permissible and possible to seek a stay on the operation of the assessing officer itself. Now, what is the difference between a stay of demand and a stay on the operation of the assessment order? If a stay of demand is granted, the consequential proceedings will not be affected. That means only demand will not be enforced against you, but all other proceedings like penalty, prosecution, etc., etc., will continue. But if you move an application for a stay on the operation of the assessment order, and if that is allowed, which legally can be allowed, whether it will be allowed or not will depend on the facts. But legally it is permissible to be allowed, and if that is allowed, all consequential proceedings will also get affected and get a stay. So there lies the catch. I have not seen in 33, 34 years of my association with the income tax department and working in all capacities, starting from assessing officer right up to the appellate authority, where one single application has been moved seeking a stay of operation of the impugned order before the commissioner, which will save the taxpayer from a lot of harassment. That is the one part. The second part is the revenue will have the same rights, because if you read the provision of section 250, there is no difference between the appellant and the revenue. They are on the same footing. Only thing is that one is against the other. Since we follow adversarial system of law in our country, inherited from the Westminster model of law from our colonial master England, Britain, there has to be one side opposing the other, and out of that the adjudicating authority has to cull out the truth and adjudicate and decide. Revenue has the same rights, so revenue can also move application for any relief it wants. If some sort of a stay has been granted by the commissioner appeal, revenue can move a counter application for vacation of the stay under the same provision. If the operation of the impugned assessment order has been stayed, revenue can again file an application asking for vacation because of the consequences involved, which again will be looked into facts, based on the facts will be decided. No assessing officer or no revenue or none of the commissioner ever think of invoking the jurisdiction of commissioner appeal under section 251(1)(c) for any benefit. If SSC is not invoking, appellant is not invoking, so is the revenue. So that is this thing. The next part is, for an appellant it is very important. Rule 46A is there. And it is quite restrictive provision where either you cannot lead any evidence which was not there before the assessing officer, or you have to work extra hard to satisfy the commissioner appeal that why that additional material should be entertained. And of course, law is clear. The Supreme Court has been saying time and again that normally an appellate authority should be liberal in entertaining any material, because at best it will reveal the truth. No harm will visit to any side if something which is material is considered, even if it was not considered by the first authority. But there will be n number of commissioner appeal who will say that since it was not there before the assessing officer, I will not consider. The reason is also perfectly maintainable, that the particular order which is being contested was passed by the assessing officer based on the material before him. So what commissioner appeal has to see whether that order could have been passed based on that material or not. But there again can be n number of reasons where the SSC or the appellant could not lead that evidence. Maybe it was not available in real time. Maybe he did not realize the true import. Maybe he submitted but could not properly canvass. There can be so many situations. Maybe he was unable to collect things in time. Maybe assessing officer did not summon the material which he wanted him to summon. So many situations. So the other side can also be perfectly all right. Now, 46A is one option. It's a very narrow window, but nonetheless a window. But then you can move an application under section 251(1)(c) as well, seeking an interim direction to assessing officer to produce whatever you want to be produced. Or you can make an application to commissioner appeal to summon your witness, to summon those records from some third party which are not there with the assessing officer but are certainly there. Section 131 is there. Section 131 has also a similar role. But 251C is more specific. 131 is available to other proceedings also. 251C is only to Commissioner Appeal. So you can always move an application that's particular record, particular evidence, particular witness be summoned in support of the case of the appellant as a defense witness, as a defense record. That will be permissible. And if you feel that it has not been correctly adjudicated by the Commissioner Appeal, your remedies will be there before the tribunal as well as before the higher forums. Similarly, while 131 will lead to inspection and discovery provisions will be there, there may be some other situations where you want yourself to examine. Now you can't say Commissioner Appeal to summon you as your witness, that is the appellant himself. An appellant wants to state certain facts. He wants his version to be taken into consideration. That also will be permissible under Section 251(1)(c), but you can't move an application perhaps under Section 131 asking the Commissioner Appeal to summon yourself. So you can move that please allow me to examine myself as my witness. You can move an application for cross-examination of the assessing officer or any other authority relied upon by the assessing officer if that authority has not been offered for cross-examination. Not every case of non-offering of cross-examination will prejudice the case. So there may be a situation where you can say that, all right, assessing officer did not allow me to cross-examine this particular material or evidence or witness. You allow me, and you will, Commissioner Appeal will have to ensure that that particular piece of evidence or particular witness is subjected to cross-examination by you in the case of a very big case having very large ramifications. The chartered accountant appearing who used to come from Bombay, he moved an application before me for cross-examination of assessing officer. I allowed it. He moved an application for cross-examination of valuation, the valuer, registered valuer. I allowed it. Of course, he didn't say 251(1)(c), but orally I told him that where is the jurisdiction. He says, sir, you have all the jurisdiction. So I said, all right, you write by hand 251(1)(c). He wrote, and then I allowed it, and they cross-examined the appellant. Of course, things went wrong for them because the registered valuer stood his ground and scared they didn't cross-examine the assessing officer, but I had allowed. So where you feel that Rule 46A notwithstanding, now 46A is subject to limitations. 251(1)(c) is not. 46A is a specific statutory jurisdiction conferred on appellate authorities, Commissioner Appeal, ITAT. But 251(1)(c) is a specific general saving of the inherent power of the appellate authority vested in the Commissioner Appeal. So something which may not be permitted under Section 46A can always be permitted under Section 251(1)(c). Now here, a situation will arise. Some of you may be tempted to think it that way, that if 46A is rejected, then you can move it to 251(c). That perhaps will not be allowed by any Commissioner Appeal who has little knowledge of general law. You can't go on raising the same issue again and again by changing the section. So you have to make up your mind in the first place whether you want to invoke the jurisdiction under Section 46A, Rule 46A, or you want to invoke the jurisdiction section 251(1)(c). After getting one rejected, you can't say that I am moving another application for the same relief. Or otherwise, you write in the preamble of your application, an application under Rule 46A, as also under Section 251(1)(c). In that case, Commissioner Appeal will have to consider under both the provisions. And if he agrees, he will say why he is agreeing. He may allow under one provision, may not allow under another. That is permissible in law. So he may say that this provision, this application is not maintainable or not permissible under Rule 46A, but is permissible under Section 251(1)(c), and therefore is allowed. And that would be a perfectly lawful order. So anything which you feel will mitigate the hardship of the taxpayer during the pendency of the appeal before Commissioner Appeal can be raised, can be agitated before Commissioner Appeal under Section 251(1)(c). But rarely it is done, rarely it has been done. And to be fair, I also did not do when I used to be assessing officer. So it is not that only I am wise. I learned it over the years by working my way in the department. It's not that way that, in fact, one day I told this to Principal Chief Commissioner Delhi, and he was immediately surprised. He read it himself, read it twice. And then he said, yes, you are right. We can do anything. He says, yes, it is 151 CPC. And he immediately called a meeting of all his commissioner appeals, almost 40 of them. It was Delhi. And told them to use, but I don't know how many of them understood the point and how many of them are using. But what is surprising is that the taxpayer for whose benefit, the appellant for whose benefit this provision can be far more useful, is also not being used. So that was the purpose of today's discussion. One issue may arise, which I am saying for academic purpose, that some commissioner appeal may take a line of argument, or may be inclined to take the line of argument, that 251(1)(c) is subject to the overall jurisdiction of 246A. 246A says what can be appealed before commissioner appeal, and various types of orders are mentioned, you know. It includes all types of assessment orders, it includes all types of penalty orders, it includes some other residuary orders, some of which are no longer there on the statute, like registration of firm, etc., etc. That will be very narrow interpretation of law, narrow construction of law. Of course, anything which is other than assessment and other than penalty, and which is not mentioned there under Section 251(1) subsection, will be covered by 246A, that those residuary orders, which are not the assessment order, which are not the penalty orders, what happens to them? What are the powers of commissioner appeal? So they will come to this. Yes. But the phrase which says in any other case is not limited or confined to the residuary remaining leftover orders of passed by the revenue or the assessing officer or any other income tax authority who is amenable to the jurisdiction of commissioner appeal. It will cover any other situation, meaning thereby it will cover all eventualities. And that is why in the beginning I mentioned the inherent powers of the appellate authority. As I said, there is no specific power to grant a stay by commissioner appeal. But Allahabad High Court was pleased to direct me to decide the stay application within 2 weeks. Of course, that can be done under writ jurisdiction also. But the issue was not there that there is no jurisdiction. And which is what my chief commissioner asked me, and when we discussed and examined the entire thing, we agreed that yes, it can be done because there is an inherent jurisdiction of commissioner appeal or any appellate authority to pass any interim order, pass any interlocutory order to prevent the abuse of the process of law or to meet the ends of justice. Now, these two catchphrases, to meet the end of justice and to prevent the abuse of the process of law, will cover any other situation which is necessary to ensure that no person, either revenue or the appellant, is unnecessarily prejudiced or is prejudiced in a manner which probably is not the intent or mandate of the law. So the logical, liberal, constructive interpretation of the provisions of Section 251(1)(c) will not only cover the residuary orders under section 246A, but will also cover the other remaining issues which will be part of the inherent powers of any civil court. The authority, the person, the side to the dispute who wants to avail it will of course will have to show how it is covered, because you are invoking the jurisdiction, then you have to make out the case that you are covered by the jurisdiction. Authority may disagree, other side may contest, but nonetheless, it can be invoked. For about 2 years, I passed several orders under section 251(1)(c), sometimes imposing cost on the appellant for not attending the hearings, as a result of which the appeal got dismissed ex parte, best judgment order, etc. And then they came back and explained also that for this region or that region, the appellant was not able to attend. In that case, I said, all right, you have a right that your case must be decided on the merits. But at the same time, the other side also has a right not to be prejudiced or not to be inconvenienced. So, all right, to compensate the revenue for the inconvenience which has been caused because of your non-appearance, and invariably people used to pay the cost imposed by me. I recalled the ex parte dismissal of appeals under section 251(1)(c). I do not know whether any side went to tribunal to contest, because I didn't receive any order against my such invocation of jurisdiction and such adjudication. And I was told orally by some senior professionals that once this issue was raised before the learned tribunal, and the honorable member was very categorical that yes, there is inherent power vested in Commissioner Appeal, and exercise of that, Commissioner Appeal can pass appropriate orders. So no need to interfere. See what happens when an assessment order is dismissed by default for non-prosecution, ex parte. You go to the tribunal, as it has been dismissed ex parte without adjudicating the merit. The chances are, 99% chances are, that tribunal will not adjudicate the merit itself, and should not also, because that will prejudice you also. Because if tribunal adjudicates the merit, your one valuable right of appeal is taken away. If Commissioner Appeal adjudicates the merits, you will get one more right to appeal, which will not be there if you get the facts adjudicated by the tribunal. So normally, any higher appellate authority does not interfere on merits if the lower appellate authority had not adjudicated on the merits, and remands the matter back. This will take at least about a year, meaning thereby during that period the appellant will be chased by the assessing officer to pay the demand, and assessing officer is very much within his rights, and he's right. Your appeal has been dismissed. Now you can't say that you will not pay the demand, whatever be your feelings, and your appeal has been dismissed because of non-prosecution, non-appearance. So you have no right to say that any prejudice is being caused to you. Nobody prevented you from canvassing your case before Commissioner Appeal. So if you invoke 251(1)(c) before Commissioner Appeal itself, it will be decided, I think, maximum within a month. The only requirement will be a notice will have to be given to the assessing officer, take his response, consider that, and then decide. Maybe maximum 2 months. And that will save a lot of infructuous work of the assessing officer, as well as a lot of work of the other side. There were situations, because there was a judgment of Allahabad High Court which said that if you do not issue 143(2) notice, you cannot do the assessment, and you cannot even rectify your mistake. While other high courts have been of the view that 143(2) is not issued, then it can be issued again, and thereafter assessment will be done. So I was following Allahabad High Court while in Noida, and since 143(2) was not issued, the assessment was required to be cancelled. But liberty could not be allowed to the assessing officer to give 143(2) once again and do this. There were several cases in which the assessing officer came back to me that, sir, we have issued 143(2). And SSC has either incorrectly stated or probably facts were not before you. And after ascertaining the facts and after giving notice, in several cases, I recalled my own order, dismissing the appeal against the appellant, and then re-adjudicated. Of course, as per law and merits and facts. So, 251(1)(c) is something which is available to you for any issue which arises out of the pendency of appeal, during the course of pendency of appeal, and which, if not addressed by the Commissioner Appeal, will cause prejudice to either side. Of course, the side which is going to prejudice will have to move. You can't expect the other side to come before Commissioner Appeal and say that since he is going through prejudice, please use your authority under 251(c) and give him relief. The other side will have its right to oppose also. Probably other side will say that no, it is not covered by 251(c), or what prejudice is being claimed itself is not correct. So those will be issues of facts. As far as issue of law, by invoking 251(1)(c), you can very well get the interim relief from the Commissioner Appeal, which will include suspension of the operation of the impugned assessment order, which in turn would mean automatically stay of the penalty proceedings and a stay of the prosecution proceedings. Because both penalty proceedings and prosecution proceedings will be based on the assessment order. If the operation of that order gets stayed, all the consequences will also get stayed automatically. And you don't have to rush to the High Court, unnecessarily creating infructuous work for the higher courts to get the proceedings stayed, to get the penalty proceedings stayed, or to get the prosecution proceedings stayed. Of course, Commissioner Appeal can always reject your petition, but then that will give you a cause of action before tribunal. And if tribunal is of the view that there is no jurisdiction or it cannot attend, you can go to the higher court either as an appeal or in the writ jurisdiction, saying that you are remediless. So my recommendation, my suggestion to the professionals as well as the officers of the Department Revenue is that 251(1)(c) is a very purposive piece of legislation. It was brought on the statute by the legislature with a specific mandate, and should be used very frequently, very regularly, because that is what it is meant for, as Section 151 CPC is used in civil court proceedings. Thank you, Mr. Quran.
Sir, can we take 2-3 queries?
Sure. Yes, sure, no problem.
First,
but your picture is not coming.
Now it's okay. CA Dilip Lohia ji, he wants to ask, sir, what is the importance of judgment of honorable tribunal in CIT appeal if no case law of honorable courts of the issue in appeal?
This is a separate, altogether separate issue. But anyway, if you permit, I can answer because you are the host. See, issue is your query is that what is the value of precedence of the order of the learned tribunal before Commissioner Appeal? Is it so?
Yes.
See, in India, as I told you, we follow the English law, the Westminster model of law. Now, English law has a doctrine of precedence. The doctrine of precedence says that any order of a higher court becomes binding on the lower court. In the scheme of the thing, the tribunal is a higher appellate forum. Commissioner Appeal is a lower appellate forum. So when any order is passed by a higher appellate forum, it would be binding on the lower appellate forum. But since tribunal is not a constitutional court, the ITAT, Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, it's not a law-laying authority. It decides an issue with reference to facts. So the order of the tribunal will be binding only on that particular commissioner who is subordinate to that tribunal for its orders. Number one. Will be binding only when the issues are same. That is the same SSC. The doctrine of precedence is also very, very elaborately dealt with by the Supreme Court. And it says even minutest difference in facts will distinguish an order of any higher forum, even a judgment of Supreme Court can be distinguished on issues of facts. So while any judgment of the tribunal who is my tribunal, that means before which my orders will go, or the particular commissioner appeals orders will go, will normally be binding on him, but not on the other commissioners of appeal, unlike High Court, which will have territorial jurisdiction over a particular area and will be binding in everybody in that area, or Supreme Court under Article 141, any judgment of Supreme Court is binding on all courts in the territory of India. Here in this case, if the other side is able to show that the facts are different, even minutest difference, the Supreme Court has said in one case that even the minutest difference of facts will distinguish a judgment. That's why we say that, sir, this judgment is not applicable to this case, both sides. If you cite a case, your opponent will say that judgment is not applicable because facts are different. But normally, the tribunal being a higher forum of the commissioner appeal, the concerned commissioner appeal, jurisdictional commissioner appeal, over whom the tribunal has jurisdiction, should be respected by the commissioner appeal because it is coming from a higher forum, and hierarchy has to be respected and followed. And normally every commissioner appeal will follow unless he will be distinguishing that, look, I have all the respect and regard for the tribunal, which is my tribunal, and I have done it in a number of cases. But because of these peculiar facts, the case is not applicable to the given facts before me, and there is no offense in this. In fact, in my case, large number of complaints orally or even sometimes in the pleadings were made that he has not accepted the tribunal's order, and tribunal was laughing that all right, he has given the reasons that why he is not applicable, why he is not accepting. In fact, in one case, I simply refused to obey the tribunal, though it was given to me only, because there was a contradictory direction by the Allahabad High Court in the case of the Noida Authority, and what line I was taking was finally taken by the Supreme Court, and that is how Noida Authority, which was refusing and fighting with us, with the Income Tax Department for last about 20 years, that they will not pay tax. Now they have reconciled, they are paying tax, and they have become taxpayer. There were two judgments. The tribunal said that Noida Authority will not pay tax. The Allahabad High Court said that Noida Authority will pay tax. I was in a peculiar situation. Both were my superior courts. I framed a question of law. If there is a conflict between the tribunal's judgment and High Court judgment, which one I am going to obey? And answered that I will obey the High Court. That was taken to the High Court. A very senior advocate, also very well-known politician, appeared and was not even given a stay against my order. He even raised the bogey of contempt, and the court laughed. He said, what contempt? No contempt. He has given reason for everything. And that writ was finally dismissed after Supreme Court judgment came. So any lower authority should be respectful for the higher authority. But distinguishing the judgment of a higher authority, in this case the tribunal by commissioner appeal, by giving cogent reasoning, will not amount to any disrespect and will not be taken as any disrespect, even by you. Suppose the revenue ITO AO has cited some judgments, and if you say that the judgment of the tribunal is not applicable, this does not amount to any disrespect if you distinguish it lawfully. Yes.
Yes, next query is there. Whether this section, it should form part of grounds of separate application be filed? Please clarify.
Obviously, if you are moving a separate application, then you have to give, see, there is a format. If you see the Supreme Court rules, see the format of the SLP, etc., there is interim relief column in the format itself. the Form 35 does not have any column for interim relief.
Yes.
So you will have to move a separate application. An application has to be self-contained.
Okay.
You can write always one line that all the grounds pleaded by you in your main appeal, Form 35, should also be read as part and parcel, which is generally what is written in the civil courts or high courts, etc., that the grounds taken in the main appeal or main proceeding should also be treated as part and parcel, because you may be falling back on them. But certainly a separate application should be filed along with the separate grounds, because the grounds of giving the final relief will be different and grounds of giving interim relief will be different. You just go to any commentary of CPC, section 151 is there. There are 3-4 criteria, well laid out judgments are there, Supreme Court. It's a settled law. Anybody who reads law knows those 3-4 criteria of granting interim relief. So basically your grounds should be those 3 or 4 grounds, that how it is going to cause irreparable or irreversible loss or injury to you, how balance of convenience is in your favor, and how it is covered by the provisions of law, etc. So there will need not be 10 or 20 grounds of interim relief, because that will come, it has already come in your main application in the statement of fact in Form 35. What you can do is, you can read, just add one caveat which is done, that all the grounds taken and all the facts stated in the appeal may also kindly be read as part and parcel, because both the files will be there before the Commissioner Appeal. You can just open your Form 35 and see that what ground you have taken, or you can open your Form 35 and show it to the Commissioner Appeal that, look sir, I have taken this ground and I have met this prayer, and that will be perfectly all right. But application will be separate and with 2-3 grounds separately for seeking any interim relief. Any relief, because interim relief will be for the period of the pendency of appeal. It will not be, of course, there is provision in law where interim relief can be made absolute. But for that, separate order is needed, separate recital is needed. Otherwise, it merges and lapses with the final order. So interim relief, like non-payment of demand, that will be only for the period your appeal is pending. Suppose your appeal is dismissed, interim, you can't say that now I will not pay because at that time you allowed. Your appeal is allowed, then there is no need to say that you don't pay, no need for a stay. So final order in any case will cover the interim order normally. So therefore, sometimes courts, higher courts at least, sometimes they make the interim order absolute even in the final order, because of the facts are peculiar. But grounds will have to be taken separately and make it 1 page, maximum 2 pages.
Okay.
I think 1 page will be more than enough, because all facts are there in statement of facts. So you simply say that because of the fact stated in Form 35 and the grounds taken therein, the appellant will suffer irreparable loss and injury. The balance of convenience in his favor because of XYZ. So therefore, it is in the interest of justice and to prevent the abuse of the process of law that the Learned Commissioner Appeal may kindly stay the disputed demand or stay the impugned assessment order, operation of the impugned assessment order, till the appeal is decided finally by the Commissioner Appeal. I think that will be sufficient.
One similar query is there. Whether relief is through writ only, since only order under section 250 is...
No. See, writ will always lie. That is for the High Court to decide to entertain or not. The basic underlying principle of law behind a writ jurisdiction is the person should be remediless. The writ is meant for those situations which are not specifically covered by law. There may always be a situation when there is no provision in law. What would you do? Your life and liberty is at stake. Your money is at stake. So normally, high courts do not entertain the writ petitions on which there is a statutory remedy available. That is also in your interest, because if you go straight to the High Court, the order of Commissioner Appeal or Tribunal will not bind the High Court, but order of the High Court will bind, as I told you. Tribunal has given one finding, High Court has given another. Now, Tribunal stood overruled and Tribunal accepted. They agreed that yes, once the High Court is there, we are overruled. Like once Tribunal is there, I am overruled. Commissioner Appeal is overruled. So, you need not go to the writ always, but sometimes in extraordinary situations, because of some urgency, some other things, High Courts can entertain, they have the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction is unfettered. But normally, High Court will say that since you have a statutory remedy available, go and first avail, and that will be in your interest, because whatever finding Tribunal gives against that order, any order passed by Commissioner Appeal is appealable to Tribunal. It doesn't say which order, it simply say an order. So an order passed in interim application is also an order. So that will also, like a state appeal rejects your appeal for, your petition for stay of demand. That order can be impugned before ITAT, either in a pending appeal or as a separate appeal. There was a case when I rejected the stay application and my appeal was pending before me. Still, tribunal went, the appellant went to the tribunal and got a stay on my rejecting the stay of demand case. And demand got stated, which was later on decided with some direction by the tribunal. They vacated the stay, but they asked me to dispose the appeal by certain date. So it is in your interest that you should first invoke the judicial tribunal, but in some rare cases, assuming you are available to the High Court, the bank accounts are being attached, the assets are being attached, your business is going to suffer, tribunal will take more time, bench is not available in tribunal, some other difficulty is there, and you feel that your lawyer can explain the circumstances to the court for invocation of the writ jurisdiction, you can go. There is no bar. Legally, there will be no bar, but normally High Court will not entertain, and it is not entertainable, rather, and preferable to go to the tribunal first. Yes.
Sure. Sir, another query is Deepak Chirani ji wants to know revised ground application. Please explain it a little bit.
See, ground is something which is the basis on which you ask relief. Ground is that way, take it literally. The ground is something on which your case is standing up. Grounds can be of two types. It can be a fact, it can be a law, and of course, mixed of both. Suppose the assessing officer says that you have unaccounted cash credit in your books of accounts or in your bank account, and he is invoking section 68. But your facts are different. There is no unaccounted cash credit. Bank has just paid interest to you. Now that will not be unaccounted cash credit unless the initial deposit is unaccounted. So there can be a ground of fact where you can show that the fact as relied upon by the assessing officer is not correct. And there can be legal grounds. The general discipline which is followed by any appellate authority is that he will not allow you normally, of course there is no absolute bar, normally to take revised grounds of fact because you know your facts. It's your case, the appellant's case. And an appellant should come with clean hands before any higher forum. That is called equitable justice. You can't conceal the fact initially and then come later on when you are cornered by the other side. That will be dishonesty. Or you knew the fact but did not take care or not careful enough to plead those facts, then you may not be allowed later on to plead those facts because doctrine of waiver will come in. Waiver is something which you can do and still do not do. Then it is presumed that you do not want that to be done or do not want to do, and therefore you are waiving your right. Like 143(2) has not been issued, but you still went and attended the hearing. And AO will say that in the course of proceeding, he read out your rights. That Mr. So-and-so, Mr. Appellant, Mr. SSC, Mr. Professional, these are your rights. And I'm telling you that I want to take this action against you. And he did not challenge. So in that case, doctrine of waiver may come in. And I have dealt with such situations where facts were not pleaded initially and later on they sought to plead. I said, why? Either you did not act with clean hand or you were not careful enough. So law is also that law will not come to your doorstep. You have to go to the law. And if an litigant, if an appellant is not careful enough to plead its case thoroughly, honestly, truthfully, the law will not come to his rescue. That is a question of fact. But the law is very clear regarding legal grounds. Legal grounds are your law. You can take anytime. Anytime, meaning, suppose in the initial Form 35 appeal, you have not taken a particular legal ground. Maybe that ground has arisen afterwards. In the sense, when you filed the appeal, there was no judgment of the High Court on a particular issue of say Section 68. After you filed the appeal, after hearing started, the jurisdictional High Court came out with a judgment which helps you. That becomes a legal ground. So you can take the legal ground even in the course of final hearing. But you have to take it. You have to plead that, sir, a judgment has come, maybe tribunal, maybe High Court, maybe Supreme Court, which is by your jurisdictional higher forum, or maybe other, and this is a legal issue. I want to take this legal ground. Just write one application by hand, if even sitting before the commissioner appeal, or excuse yourself for 5-10 minutes. Sir, मुझे 5 minutes दीजिए. Give me 10 minutes. Move an application then and there, and any commissioner appeal will allow. Legal grounds are permissible anytime, even before the order is going to be dictated. It should be legal ground. There is no discretion with any higher appellate authority not to entertain a legal ground, because legal grounds are your right, legal rights. That has to be allowed to you. If it is not being allowed, then ensure that it is there on the record, so that when you go to the higher appellate forum, you can take the ground that this legal ground was pleaded, but was not entertained or was not properly adjudicated, and a higher appellate forum will come to your help and rescue. Yes.
Yes, sir. Another query is, may under a same appeal, we may ask relief under section 251(1)(c).
I told you, probably you didn't listen carefully. I told you that suppose you move an application under Rule 46A, which is rejected.
Yes.
And then you come back with the same prayer under 251(1)(c). That will not be permitted, that is not permissible in law. But what you can do is, when you make an application, you write a preamble of the application that gives an idea that what is the purpose of the application. Yes. There you can say that an application under Rule 46A of the Income Tax Rules 1962, read with the provisions of Section 251(1)(c) of Income Tax Act 1961. Then what will that? You will have best of both the worlds. You can invoke both provisions together, but you cannot invoke one after another. Suppose it is 251(1)(c) is rejected, right or wrong, you have a right to go to a higher appellate forum, but 251(1)(c) is rejected. You can't come into Rule 46A again, asking the same relief. So it is better, if you feel, then you club both.
Yes.
Club both, no harm, that is permissible. Like invariably you will see that a writ petition under Article 226, read with 227, read with 482 CRPC, or read with so-and-so 151 CPC, or read with so-and-so of so-and-so. Even you can combine Constitution with the Income Tax Law, Income Tax Act. So in that case, you can say that, all right, sir, if my application, if my relief is not admissible under 46A, sir, I am also invoking your jurisdiction under Section 251(1)(c). Please consider my case there. That will be permissible, but you can't say that let us wait, because what happens is that once your application under 46 is adjudicated, you have prized open the case of the other side. And after knowing that what revenue is going to say, assessing officer is going to say, opposing your application, you will improve those, meet those challenges and try. So that becomes dishonesty. That's why you will not be allowed to raise the same issue again and again. And though res judicata does not apply to income tax law, still Commissioner Appeal will be within a jurisdiction to dismiss this, saying that you are acting dishonestly. You first filed a decoy application, got the grounds of the assessing officer disclosed, and then you are improving your case and coming again. And that will be perfectly all right. No higher forum will come to your rescue if those are the observations of CAT appeal in the order. They will throw you out. Tribunal will dismiss. High Court may even impose cost. So it is better that you plead your case together, so that this question of dishonesty will not arise against you, whoever it is. It could be assessing officer, it could be appellant. You can say that I have invoked both. That is permissible. You can invoke the jurisdiction of any authority under any any number of statute if that authority has jurisdiction under those statute. So Commissioner Appeal has jurisdiction under Rule 46A of the Income Tax Code as well as 251(1)(c). Both can be clubbed together and invoked simultaneously, but not as an alternative or one after another. That will not be permissible in law.
Okay, sir, let's take the last query. Can appeal be disposed of relying on multi-plan?
What is multi-plan?
Not complete query.
What is meant by multi-plan? I mean, I'm not.
No issue. So, really, thank you very much, sir, for such a wonderful session. I can say that on the wonder of the provision of Section 251(1)(c). We are really honored for all of this, for spreading the knowledge amongst the members, because it was I already told, very less awareness about the section.
कुछ नहीं है, बिल्कुल चतुर्वेदी पीछे सारी में 4 line. That's all. Both sides. And to be fair, मैंने कहा ही, I didn't use it when I was assessing officer. I could have used it, but because I was not told by my seniors at that time, and I didn't have that much of wisdom to realize the true import as a junior officer. Now, of course.
So my request to you from time to time, please guide us some more relevant provision which we people are not aware of.
That much better will be because this I suggested to Ashwini because that was in my mind. What better topic is? If you feel that there is some topic on which I can speak on your forum, I have no problem.
Definitely.
You tell me the topic.
Sure,
you tell me the topic. Basically, what I am recommending is, which I have been recommending to the local bar wherever I have been, the chartered accountants by very nature, they acquire mastery over the accounting areas.
Yes.
But since they are not exposed to law, substantive law they perforce read.
Yes.
Section पढ़ लिया, particular section 68 पढ़ के आ गए. But procedural law they skip.
Exactly.
And procedural law is mandatory. Substantive law is directory.
Yeah.
If an appeal is dismissed on the grounds of procedural law, higher court will not come to your rescue. You have not deposited the fee.
Yeah.
One example will make it clear. There was a case of NRI in, I think, this foreign circle, etc. Company was amalgamated. Khatam. There is no company now. Some demand was raised. It was a foreign company, Korean company. The company which has got amalgamated, they filed appeal. Now, how to pay the fee? The CEO of the company used his PAN to deposit the fee because without PAN, fee will not be accepted. On merit, they may have a case, they may not have a case. I asked them that who has paid the fee. So then issue came out that fee has been paid by the CEO. I mean, who is he? He is the CEO of the parent company. Then how can he do this of the appellant? Then I asked, where is the appellant? The lapse which they had committed is, when they drafted the amalgamation deed, they forgot to write one line. That amalgamating company will represent them. Because that was a foreign company they were leaving, they thought smart that better not to have any liability at all. So I said that, all right, you may have deposited 1,000 rupees in the account of Government of India. If you want, you can take it back. Go and claim to the assessing officer in your assessment. My appeal is not maintainable because fee has not been deposited by the appellant or on behalf of the appellant. I will tell that trick also. But they were, sometimes by bringing a big name, they brought in a very senior advocate from Delhi. I told him, "Kya aap mujhe bata dijiye, how do I?" He agreed with me. Yes, sir. Appeal is not maintainable. Now, sometimes under instruction of the client, the professional can also deposit, the CA can deposit the fee and take it reimbursed. There is no problem. But there should be client in existence.
Yes.
So when the amalgamation deed was drafted and put up to the High Court for approval, they forgot to make a clause that all the pending matters will also be taken over by the amalgamating company. And because of that, the amalgamating company could not have filed the appeal. And my order was upheld by the tribunal. Assessing officer was so damn pleased. Sir, moti recovery ho jayegi. So procedural law, what I am recommending to, especially to the chartered accountants, yes, you are master of accountancy, you know practice, your knowledge, you have cleared a very tough selection exam held by your institute, you are practicing every day. But it is the procedural law where you normally suffer because you do not pay as much attention to the procedural law. And procedural law, there is no negotiation, there is no room of discretion. Procedural law is to be complied mandatorily. If fee is to be paid, fee is to be paid. There is no discretion. Commissioner Appeal cannot say that, no, I like Mr. Khurana because of this, so all right, even if he has not paid the fee, I will hear his appeal because there is a case on merit. No. Fee is to be paid, only then Commissioner Appeal will open the file. So procedural law has to be complied with in its entirety. Invariably, the professionals who are chartered accountants, I'm not saying all, there are good chartered accountants who have very good knowledge of law, but generally because of preoccupation with accounting side, the chartered accountants ignore law on the procedural side, and which creates problem because see, Commissioner Appeal may not appreciate, the tribunal may also not, but High Court and Supreme Court will come down very heavily on procedural side. They come very heavily on procedural side. They will say that, look, get lost. You did not comply with this procedural requirement. We will not come to your help. Forget the merits. Merit will be considered only when your appeal is prima facie maintainable. Your appeal is not admissible at all. So no. So that is what I am recommending, that when you are invoking the jurisdiction of any higher authority, any appellate forum, please ensure that there is no mistake on the procedural side. I have dismissed any number of appeals on procedural grounds, and tribunal has upheld those. That's why the initial grievance against me in Noida in 2015, when I joined, कि साहब वो हम लोगों को इनकम टैक्स एक्ट में आने ही नहीं देते हैं, उधर ही कुछ लिख करके अपील डिसमिस कर देते हैं. तो जब प्रिंसिपल सीसी आए, बार के साथ मैंने मीटिंग रखी, ये इशू क्रॉप अप हुआ. प्रिंसिपल सीसी ने पूछा कि भाई अपील में क्यों नहीं चले जाते. कहते साहब वहां जाते हैं तो मेंबर कह देते हैं भाई इसमें क्या गलत है, तुमने ये कंप्लाई नहीं किया था, विच यू आर एडमिटिंग, तो कैसे हम इंटरफियर करें. तो वो अच्छा ठीक है. तो फिर मैंने क्या किया, मैंने I got 2-3 seminars organized for the assessing officer, teaching them that they should not make procedural mistakes. And I told bar that if you feel, especially for younger professionals, then I will come and teach the same thing which I have taught to my officers. And almost all bars, Ghaziabad, Noida, Aligarh, etc., they organize such gatherings, and where we discuss the procedural law, how to comply and why to comply. And I think that must have been fruitful for the younger professionals. Sure, so sir. Compliance of procedural law is a must and mandatory. Please.
Sure, sir. Sure. Definitely. We'll discuss with you.
जब भी आपको लगे कि कोई टॉपिक है जिस पर लगे कि I can speak, तो आप मुझे टॉपिक बताएं. अगर if I feel that I can speak or I can be of any use,
definitely
I will be happy to speak.
Will be our pleasure, sir. So thank you very much once again, and thank you everyone for watching.
I have not been too monotonous or too boring.
No, sir. No.
Not much monotonous and boring.
Really wonderful session. It's really wonderful, and everybody enjoyed and saying thanks in your chat box. So now we'll meet tomorrow. We have another webinar on the enforcement. Yes, sir. On the practical aspects of the ED proceeding. So till then, bye. Take care.
Thank you. बंद कर दे.